Members of the Historical Review Board present at this moment are
Todd Iceland.
Ken Basinger, acting as chairman tonight, and staff over in the corner fooling with the electronics.
Christina Robertson-Gardner.
Thank you.
Christina Robertson-Gardner.
Is everybody familiar with the procedure for public hearings? We have it over there, so familiarize yourself with that. If you are planning to give testimony, Christina has a form to fill out.
Yeah, actually, I left them out in the front table. They're blue forms. You can pick one out in the front table.
Okay. Is there any public comment for items not on the agenda? Good. We're moving right along here. The first item, then, is a code enforcement question regarding 403 Adams Street and the construction of a fence. And I would like to ask staff to give us a history and details on that.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Basinger. I received a code enforcement notice at the beginning of August for a chain link fence at 403 John Adams. I went out and took photographs, which you can see on the PowerPoint there. And according to the Historic Review Board policies, which you have in your packet, policy number 6, which is policy on construction of fences and walls for designated structures, not acceptable in the front yard is a chain link fence. So if you can take a look, you'll see under the not acceptable category. This code enforcement sent an initial notice of violation to the owners, and I talked with them over the phone right after the notice of violation, and I felt, they had called the city to ask about fence heights. Unfortunately, they didn't identify themselves as being a designated historic structure, and so they received the information on fence heights, but not on building material requirements. I wanted to be able to send this to the Historic Review Board tonight before any formal action is, before the next step of any formal action is taken through code enforcement to address not meeting the policy. One, to see if the Historic Review Board wants to review this policy and still see if it still stands as is, and if they almost want to reaffirm the policy, if they want to look at the policy and see if the situation does not meet, or if they want to explore any future alterations to the policy. We haven't had a chain links code enforcement sent to my office in quite a while, so I have not had to deal with this type of code enforcement for a while. So I wanted to send this back to the board to get a reaffirmation of the policies. The property is a designated structure, and I have a copy of the inventory form on your dais. And the property owners are here tonight, and they do want to make a presentation. So they are available. On my end, making sure there's adequate public education on fence material is always out there as something the city and the board needs to strive on. The McLaughlin Neighbor Association has sent out information on the fence policy in 2005 and 2006, if I believe. I've been working with Denise McGriff on those dates, and in 2001 I did send a big packet out, but that has been quite a while ago. So I do understand the applicant's concern on that end. So if you don't have any more questions, I know the applicant wants to speak tonight.
Just one question.
Mm-hmm.
The Historic Review Board policies are online?
Correct.
Okay. That's. I guess we'd like to hear from the property owners now. Please. And state your name and address to the microphone for the record, please.
Oh, sorry, can you speak into the microphone? Thanks.
I'm Donald Zent, and I've been the resident at 403 John Adams Street since 1989, so that's 20 plus years. And
That's all, just name and address was all I needed. And go ahead and tell us what you have.
Well, about early July, I decided to do something about basically the thieving that's been going on off our porch and on my property for so many years, and it was kind of a last straw thing. It was never meant to be cosmetics. It was always just a security issue. And like I said, I've lived there for so long, and I've never gotten any kind of information about fences or anything like that. There was 13 years ago, I talked to Denise about redoing my porch. I had some rotten structure, and she wanted a drawing. And so I went through my files, and I found this, and here's a handwritten note that she wrote about a missed phone call from me. I keep very good files, and this is all the information when I met with her that she gave me. And I never had received anything about any fences. I don't know if you're familiar with this packets, but that's pretty much all I've ever gotten. And I've kept these for like 13 years in my files of house receipts from 1996. And 2 years ago, July 25th, 2007, I put almost $100,000 into the house. So I'm pretty stringent about my record keeping. I just honestly can say I've gone through my file. It's big, and I've never done anything about fences or type of construction material. So when I did proceed to go talk to a Pacific Fence Company about the getting a fence, I had a feller come out, and I have existing fence in the backyard and an existing fence on 4th Street that goes from the property to the garage, which faces 4th Street, and that's chain link 4-foot high. So I just decided that I would match that style and height and make it all look complete around. All I did was look the nicer looking stuff up here to be in the front like that. I tried to make it as nice as possible. And when the fence man came out, he said, well, you may want to call the city because I think in front yards in these older towns, they'd rather have like 3.5 foot. He said, do you want me to continue to measure? And I said, well, yeah, okay. So then, I don't have the exact date of when we called the planning commission. It was, I know the week from the 6th to the 10th of July. And that was it. Actually, my girlfriend talked to the man, and then I was standing there. And we told her that 3.5 foot high on corner lots does not obstruct vision, but he never made any mention of whether
Where it was in the city.
I didn't tell him where I lived. I just was just trying to find out in general for in town here. In order to volunteer to ask him. So I just figured 3.5 foot chain link fence was okay.
Also, in the pamphlet that you get, did you bring it, the newspaper? The one I sent you?
She got this little, it's this summer 2009 thing, and it says code enforcement, and actually she's the one that found this. And on a question answer thing, it says, how high can I build a fence in my front yard? It says any fence, hedge, or wall located in front of the front facade of the building or within the front yard setback shall not exceed 42 inches in total height.
That's all it says.
Yeah.
It says,
And then, if I could show you a picture from here too, I don't want to bore you here, but this was a public records request. On the second page, this one sentence there says the primary criterion to be used by staff shall be compatibility of the proposed fence or wall with the style, period. of the designated structure. And I happened to be looking through this. And on page 41, I found a place, address is 819 4th and Madison. And that's 2 blocks east of me, and it's the Erickson House. And it's built in 1900. And I have a magnifying glass. If I can look, it looks clearly like it's on the fence. Would you like to
When was the photo taken?
1904. And my house was built in 1920.
Chain link fence didn't exist at that time. That's probably a wrought iron fence or something of the sort, but I don't believe, or possibly a woven wire pit.
Probably a woven wire.
Because, there's a picture of a bank where they have it as a place of like plexiglass. On page 19.
I love that book, by the way.
It's in a bank.
Okay.
I mean, if you'd like to look at that picture with the magnifying glass, I mean, there's like cow fence, pasture fence, but you can see the top rail and the post, and you can clearly see the bushes on the other side of the fence, and you can see the walkway through the fence in the corner. I know that the chain link fence has the top rail like that, and the post, if you'd like to.
We'll take a look, sure.
And on page 40, this is south of 4th and Jefferson, on one block of this is where my house is now. And, from this house down through there, wait, excuse me, right here. I know it's hard to see. From there down through there is chain link fence along there also. And that's why when this said from material, I thought, well, maybe that would be acceptable. And that bank, I know that it existed when it existed. They used it in that bank instead of like modern day plexiglass.
I'm not so good at photo interpretation that I could say what kind of fence I'm looking at in those pictures. It's the fence that I was looking at. Is it here?
There's
You
a
can see
picket
the
fence there.
rails. Okay, that's not the one though.
Can I ask a couple questions while we're waiting?
Certainly.
Sir, when was your house designated? Was it designated a historic structure before you purchased it or after?
I have no idea.
Okay, you knew it was as a historically designated structure?
To be honest, well, I do now. I mean, I knew back in 1996 when I was going to do the porch tours, because Dan Mountjoy, he used to live across the street from me, and he used to be on this committee. I guess, I'm not sure what. He restored a lot of the house across the street from me. Just out of talking to him, because he lived right across the street, his neighbors, I told him, yes, I'm going to have to do mine too. And then that's when he informed me that I should talk to his niece. And because that was the actual structure of the house, I was going to totally redo the front floor. And that's when I did, I went up and talked to her, and that's when I got this material here.
So you knew back in '96 that there were rules that governed what you could do to designated structures?
Yeah, but I just figured like the house structure itself. That's why, I mean, I had a wonderful picture. This was the old house, the way it was. But Denise wanted me to draw a picture, and I said, I can't draw stick figures. But I drew this for her, and she was really pleased with it, and she wanted to make a copy of it for her cards. To be honest with you, and then this material here, this was all kind of a inventory of historic properties, historic resource, inventory form, map, and these capital service. Oh my gosh! All these years that I've lived here, I just figured as long as I'm going to mess with or enhance the exterior texture of the house, that I needed to talk to people. And I took that old asbestos off in 2007. The original siding is now present. A whole bunch of
Well, okay. I really sympathize with the position you're in. Unfortunately, everything that has happened is outside the boundaries of what we as a board can do. Our charge is to maintain the historic integrity of the historic structures in the city, and that doesn't really give us the authority to intervene on your behalf when our own policy states something specifically to the contrary, which in this case it does. It's unfortunate that the communication wasn't there. The only thing that we would be able to do at this time would be to review our fence policy with the specific question of whether the chain link fence should be acceptable. And we don't have the data to make a decision on that. All we could do tonight would be to decide to make that review. So we can't make it clean for you tonight. The only thing that we could do, if the board wishes to do so, would be to instigate a review of our fence policy. Did I get any of that wrong?
No, that's correct.
I agree. I think the fence company probably should have known better too, and they should have given you some better direction. And this policy is not a new policy. It's, I don't know when.
1991, adopted in 1988, revised in 1991.
Right.
So,
I guess what I don't understand though is that living there as long as I have, and I keep such immaculate records of everything I get, I've never received anything about these policies. I have this just from when I've lived here over years.
Well, unfortunately, when you buy a home, it's up to the buyer to do your own due diligence and check with the city and find out what the rules are and keep abreast of that. So it's unfortunate that that didn't happen.
We did check with the city. We called the planning department.
But if,
You-
you gotta,
you-
it's up to you to let them know where you live and that it's a designated structure, because it's a big town and all the buildings and the areas in Oregon City aren't historic districts, conservation districts, or designated structures. And without very specific information from you, or you giving the proper information, they can't answer, they can't give you precise information unless they receive enough information.
I understand. What I guess I don't understand is why the person at the duty desk taking these calls may have lack
I personally don't think so. I think it's up to the homeowner to know what you have and what questions to ask and where you live, so you can give enough information to the clerk. And the clerk gets lots of calls all the time, and they can't possibly know the ins and outs of all the neighborhoods and go through a litany of questions to figure out for you what rules apply unless you give them the proper information.
If they would have had a property address, they would have looked it up, saw it was a designated structure, and most likely given the proper information.
I'm just not understanding why the proper information isn't given to we the people when we move into the neighborhood. Because it's not.
Well, as
I
speaking
don't know that. I mean,
speaking as a real estate broker myself, I can tell you that the real estate people on both sides of the transaction should have informed you of that. And you have no recourse on that. But on the other side of it, though, the city has never sent me notification that my electrical panel has to contain 20 amp fuses and 12 gauge wire. The city can't be expected to automatically provide all of the answers in advance to every question that might come up. But on the other hand, all of this information is available online. See, now there's the assumption that we make these days, that everybody has a computer. There is a letter that now goes out to buyers of designated properties or properties in the historic district, which contains all of the details.
Pamphlet shows that there's only so many of the darker brown places that are on this whole grid. And all the white tan apparently don't have anything to do with it. So I can understand why everyone else doesn't get that information, but if these are kind of the cared about or looked over residents and structures, I would think that everybody in this dark would get information on a regular basis that would keep them informed. I just had new neighbors move in 2 weeks ago. And I talked to them because I know I was going to become a parent. Nope, the real estate office, no one told. They've been there almost 2 weeks. I think it's very neat that what you do. It's good to, but also at the same time, times changes. I mean, it's almost 2010. And I was just trying to look out for my own security, and that really was the point of it. It wasn't cosmetics at all.
Okay.
And I would have never done this if I'd have known any of this information. I
Well-
would have spent with my concrete that I put in, with the approach and everything. It cost me over $3,500.
Well, Todd mentioned that he thought that the fencing contractor should have known something, and I agree with him. I think that if I were you, I would go back to your fencing contractor and say, hey, you put in a fence and it's not permitted in this area, and see if you can work out with him for him to replace it with a different kind of fence at a minimal cost to you.
Well, see, actually, it was him that brought my attention to the height, because I was in a good 4 feet with, was it right on the other side of my garage is 4 feet, and skipped the garage, and then I went to 4 feet again.
I'm glad you didn't go 6 feet with the razor wire. And
He's the one that he was actually the one that suggested I call the city, because he goes, I think, a lot of times, he goes, I know in Milwaukee in some areas, or wherever they go to work, that he goes, I think on corner lots, you can only go 3.5 feet, and that's what prompted us to actually call the city, was his recommendation.
Well, I think a lot of the fabric of the fence could be reused. The rails and the posts, I think, could be utilized with a different type of fence system. that would be per our standards. I think the policy's been in effect for a long time, and we don't want to set a precedent by approving something that is specifically forbidden in our policies at this point. It's an awkward situation.
I agree.
Could I just do a couple examples of something real quick? Photos.
Sir, can I have you speak louder into the microphone? Just bring it. Thanks.
Oh, it was just, if it's all right. I got some better pictures if I could show you. please.
Sure.
I really tried to design it very nicely. These gates were exactly in line with those pillars. I had to make sure they did that. That shows the corner. This is the side. And then here's the garage where the existing 4-foot net. And so that's, like I say, one of the reasons I went around with that. And the entrance, I've got these posts are in this brand new concrete. And then, unfortunately, I'm here. But this is across the street from my kitchen window, and I just don't understand why. This is 4 blocks from me. Oops, I'm sorry. And there's old tractors and cars, dilapidation, things are falling apart.
No, I mean, what you've done has been, it's well done, and
Put
it's,
in
Well,
twice as much as I paid for the house.
on issues like this, if you believe there's a code violation, you should call code enforcement and they will come out and see it, but they're not relevant to this discussion.
That's what I look at on the kitchen.
no, and what you've done is an improvement. It is. It just doesn't meet our policies that we can approve. We appreciate you improving and taking care of the house and being a good steward of the house.
Are there any other questions of the...
An audience member does want to speak on this issue.
Yes.
If that's okay.
Do I just speak from here?
No, we'll ask you to come up front and speak. Okay. Thank you for your comments, and
We're done with this fence,
we haven't concluded what we're doing, but we will,
because I have something I'd like to say.
okay. Now's your opportunity.
Okay, so you're
Grab
saying,
the microphone if you would.
is this a done deal? You made your decision that,
We have not made a decision to review our policy. We will have a discussion among ourselves following the testimony, and we will decide what we're going to do. So we haven't reached a conclusion on that.
Thank you very much.
but our situation is,
Stick around for another few minutes, and it'll be clearer.
okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you're returning to the audience for a moment. For the record, state your name and address.
My name is Paul Collins. I live at 149 Kenema Way. The previous gentleman brought out a picture taken in 1904 of the area and pointed out that there was a house in there that had a chain link fence, and you said, Mr. Basinger, that that's impossible.
I said I didn't believe that they existed then.
Chain link fencing was invented in 1844.
Okay.
The anchor
I
fence-
stand corrected.
The Anchor Fence Company of the United States is still in business and was established in 1897, so I had to go research this. So it seems that if the criteria is period appropriate, that it would have been more than period appropriate to have chain link fencing. So the idea of revisiting the policy might be in order.
That's very good to know.
Thank you.
Is there any further public comment on this? Comments from...
No.
I want to say something. So you haven't made a decision yet, is that correct?
That's the next step in our process.
Okay. Then are we going to meet again?
Stick around. If there are no further public comments, we'll close the public hearing on this at this time. And I'll ask board members if there's discussion to take place. I am frankly very surprised by the existence of chain link fence in 1844 and impressed. My observation on that is that if, in fact, and I'm not challenging what Paul told us, but if it's a fact that chain link fence existed then, it would be hard to call it not historically appropriate to have it, as he pointed out, on this property. What we would need to do in reviewing our policy would be to explore the history of chain link fence and verify what he's told us.
Well, just because it existed beforehand doesn't mean it was something that was utilized in this area on a regular basis. There are probably a lot of other kinds of fence materials used in different applications in different parts of the country that were in existence before them, but they're not necessarily appropriate for this environment and this historic neighborhood.
There again, it's almost impossible to prove a negative, by the way.
Well, the photo on the bank clearly did show it.
Okay.
Did show that.
Did show.
I wasn't
okay.
shown it, so I
Yeah.
don't.
And that corresponds with what Paul says. I would personally think that it, given that fact, we probably should review our policy and determine if there is a history of using chain link fence, or at least attempt to determine if there is a history of using chain link fence in residential properties in this area that dates back to 1844 or 1900 when this house was built.
The black is less intrusive than
Well,
standard galvanized fence.
I
and
think it's a very nice looking fence,
Yes.
mind you, but that is still a chain link fence. That is still a violation of our own policy, and the only way to change that is to review the policy and, if appropriate, then change that policy. And I would entertain a motion to do that or to not do that.
Staff point of information, the code enforcement file is on hold pending further HRB review, so on the applicant's end, it's kind of on pause right now.
Does staff have a recommendation on the policy?
No.
I think we refer it to the work session now. That would be my...
Can we do that, refer this to our next work session, put it on the agenda, and
direct staff
Though,
to do some research.
I would definitely do that, but I will do that, but definitely invite the neighborhood association to be involved and in
Yes.
that
Both
review.
McLaughlin and Kenema,
Mhm.
because it impacts both.
Correct.
And what kind of assistance can staff provide as far as exploring the history?
I can do a lot of research between now and the work session. Now, mind you, it is, the work session is only in 2 weeks. It may need to be pushed. Maybe the work session is reviewing all the information, and maybe the September hearing may be the final decision, making sure that both neighborhood associations are fully involved if they haven't been able to get involved by the work session time.
Well, I think that would be the appropriate thing to do, particularly given the circumstances of attempted due diligence. It's I feel a little extra obligation to explore this and make sure that we're not wrong. Not that that ever happened before.
Do we need to make a motion on this? Okay. I'd like to make a motion that we defer this hearing until until we have a review of the policy that's agreed upon by HRB with the neighborhood input, and just table this until a later date.
I'll second that.
All right. Oh, sorry, let me pull. Mr. Basinger?
Yes? Oh, aye.
Ms. Yates?
Aye.
Mr. Island?
Aye.
Motion carries.
You had a question, I'm sorry. The way it stands right now is we're going to try and find some history on this. Nobody's going to make you do anything about the fence until we have an opportunity to decide if our policy is historically appropriate or inappropriate. And we're going to attempt to do that at our next meeting, which is only 2 weeks away. That
September
meeting-
14th.
September 14th. That meeting
Oh,
is
excuse
held.
me. Sorry, September 8th. I apologize.
Oh, September 8th, because that's the second Tuesday, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, September 8th. That meeting is held at the planning office on Malala Avenue,
221
221 Malala Avenue,
at
At
6 o'clock.
p.m.
6 p.m. Yes, thank you.
And I would appreciate it, since I didn't have the benefit of seeing that picture, if I could see the picture, I'd get a copy of it. You said they said you had a picture that showed a chain link
The
fence.
picture
I
of the
wasn't shown that
interior of the
picture.
bank building. I have that book, too.
I think the bank one's the clearest one.
I don't know.
That book, it was in that book, the interior of the bank.
And I have a copy of that book as well.
Okay. Well, we don't have to do it now, as long as they can get that to us. Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is design advice for 804 4th Avenue in Kenema. The building is adding an accessory building to a non-designated 1970s split-entry house. And we have an applicant here.
Mr. Basinger,
Is
I
this
can...
a land use?
No, I can give a brief prep.
Please do.
This is kind of what we call the pre-design advice phase, where the applicant, in this case the applicant's architect, is just presenting preliminary drawings to the Historic Review Board to see their kind of first-hand comments and kind of giving general, non-binding direction to the applicant when they actually apply for the land use. This is an accessory building over 200 square feet in Kenema for a non-designated historic structure. Therefore, it will go in front of the Historic Review Board for formal review. This is a 1970 split entry, and I believe it was Ms. Howard Clemson's house. If
Oh,
you're
I know the house.
your Kenema.
Yep.
And new owners have bought it, and I'm working with them with some exterior alterations. They're definitely taking a little bit more modern than the 1970s. And so because of the more modern take, but also being a historic district, but having a 1970s split entry house. We have many different forces
I
kind
know
of put
the
upon
feeling.
this house. And so I really recommended the applicant to come to you. On a staff level, I've appreciated the work that they've done and the thought that they've taken into it, but because it's a little more modern, I wanted to bring it to the board so you could have your kind of first thoughts back at it. And remember, everything you say tonight is non-binding, but it's just your general comments back to the applicant.
Okay.
And this is Michael Dowd with Dowd Architecture.
Good.
I'm Mike Dowd, Dowd Architecture. Do I need to tell you my address? Christina explained the background really well. This is the house.
Mhm.
It's built in around 1980, I think, maybe a little earlier, and it's in all the historical rules for the neighborhood don't make any sense when they're applied to this, because you could never make it look historical. You wouldn't want to make it look like a pretend historical house, and also it doesn't necessarily benefit anyone to preserve it as a 70s looking house either. My clients wanted to be here tonight too, but they live out of state right now, though they're renting this out now. In the outline, I won't go through read through everything in that outline, but they have a series of things they want to do to change the function and livability and aesthetics of the house.
Mhm.
They love the neighborhood and the views and everything, but they don't really love the house as it is. And the things they especially don't like are the driveway and garages are really prominent, and there's really no relief with landscaping. The house is on a corner and it's really visible, and it doesn't fit in with the neighborhood very well. So the approach that I've been talking with Christina about is it seems like the best way to make it more compatible in the historic district is to downplay the architecture by enhancing the landscaping and making changes to the house that are sort of quiet in nature. We're not planning to do anything with really materials that would call a lot of attention to themselves. So, and basically, we're hoping the house will sort of be more in the background, and you'll see more landscaping, and it'll be a much higher quality appearance than it has now. These show this is the existing house here. This is the proposed. There's not a lot of detail here now, but the main things that we're planning to do, probably the biggest change is in the back corner of the house along Blanchard is build a new detached studio with one garage space. It'll be workspace for my client versus it won't be like a separate living unit. And then along with that, removing one of the two garage doors and then changing the location of the entry down to where one garage door is now, and then we can reduce the size of the driveway so that you'll get more landscaping down here and a nicer entry. Now you just walk up the driveway to the front door. They'll have a nicer entry, and you'll only see one garage door. And then the second garage, the new garage space, will then be on the level of the living space. So that's important to my clients because they've got older parents who may move here, and then also for themselves as they get older, they'd like to be able to park at the main level. The other things we'll be doing are changing some of the windows and the color of the house, maybe the siding material, and then doing a new deck, shallow deck across the front of the house. And the purpose of that is, right now from the street you just look right into the living room window. This will give a little buffer from that, and it also gives a place where we can put more landscaping to soften the view of the house from the street. Along with the doing the new studio and garage, there's two modifications to regulations that we'll be asking for. One of them, there's a city policy that you can only have one driveway on a corner lot, and we're keeping the number of spaces the same, but now we'll have a one-car driveway here and a one-car driveway up here into the new studio. And then the other is this is a site plan with 4th Avenue at the top and Blanchard along here, and there's a 15-foot required setback along Blanchard. The side of the house now is set back 10 feet from the property line, and we'll be asking to reduce the setback for the studio and garage here. And the reasons are that, well, for one is that the house already intrudes on that setback. The other is that there's a huge mass of rocks and a huge tree back here that shows up in the pictures, and we don't want to have to cut into that because it would be expensive and could be bad for the health of the tree, and it would make the studio look more like it got shoved into the site. So we'd rather move this forward, and then the pavement for the street is actually out I think almost 20 feet from the property lines. So we would still keep this. We'd reduce the setback, but we'd still keep 20 feet or more so that a car could park in front of the garage and not protrude out into the street. So that's basically what we're planning.
Okay. Questions?
No, I love your design.
I think
that
the
looks
concept is
beautiful.
great, yeah.
I've never had anyone say that about
A
a house
drawing?
showing them as a rectangle.
No, it's just the garage is so much less obtrusive, and everything is softer, and it's just.
On the
As-
house.
as far as the
We still need to see the
modifications on the
studio and the
main
garage
house.
design, I think.
That's true.
Yeah.
But I'm saying for the
Now,
front of the house.
That facade is very nice.
I have a question for staff regarding the intended use of the accessory building. You're calling it a studio? Is that a
Yeah,
studio
it's an
apartment?
art studio.
Art studio.
My clients are, one's I think a fabric designer, and the wife
Okay.
is a graphic artist, and so it'll be his sort of at-home cutting space.
Okay.
Now, has Nancy or someone from engineering been involved in this?
The 15-foot setback issue is a historic review board can review an alteration to that. And I think in this situation, like a lot of Kenema, the roadway is so tiny and the right-of-way is so big, getting the 20-foot, he has it in reality. So, I mean, that's something the board can look at, obviously with the neighborhood comments and comments from our city engineer and make sure there's no safety issues. But
The second
the
driveway is a
policy on the
bigger
second
concern.
driveway is really 100% up to Nancy Kreschauer. I mean, the board can make recommendations and bring comment in, but she has authority over that.
Okay. And that's all clear to you?
Yeah, I talked to someone else at the engineering department, and he gave me her name and told me I need to make my case to her, but wanted to get your preliminary.
And the design of the accessory building relative to the design of the house, or relative to the neighborhood?
Be a challenge.
Is spoken like an
Well, I can tell you
architect.
what I know now, is we really haven't done anything other than footprint, but it's, because it's an accessory building, it can be up to 600 square feet, and we need to keep it that because we're planning to take advantage of that setback reduction rule, so we can set it only 3 feet back from this rear property line. And then there's I think a 14-foot height limit, so it'll be 1 story, or maybe there would be a mezzanine in part of it. And we put the garage back here because there's a view out this way towards the river, so that probably we'll have some windows along this corner, and then whatever we do to the siding and roof of the house, I would imagine we'll do something similar.
In the time I've been on the board, we've never had this kind of a discussion of modernizing a structure in the historic district. And I'm sure you're aware, if we were entertaining an application to build a new structure, we have a lot of guidelines regarding the design of those structures in order to keep them compatible with the historic neighborhood. The neighborhood has quite a few of those split entries built in those.
Just those photos there.
Yeah.
That's why I included that one
Mhm,
picture that's just up the road a little further. There's a little pocket.
And there are others.
Mhm.
They wouldn't be allowed under today's rules, but the question of what to do with them now, because we do have a serious interest in upgrading the neighborhood, and a belief that in doing so we improve the integrity of the neighborhood and therefore the viability of the historic structures, whether we're dealing with a historic structure or with a non-historic structure in the district. What is it they say, rising tide? Yeah.
Well, this design definitely is, I feel, very appropriate and well thought out.
I
Yeah,
think you're
I've
getting
never-
some guidance here.
I've never done anything like this either. I just did a new house in Lad's Edition in Portland that people came up, well, after it was pretty far along, people were coming up and saying, my client's doing a really nice restoration, but they just couldn't remember what it looked like.
If I may suggest that you contact Howard Post, who is the chairman of the Kanema Neighborhood Association. He probably will have something to say when this comes to public hearing for approval, and you should probably work with him and the Neighborhood Association to get the input that they can give you. That would be very useful for you before coming back here with a full-blown presentation.
Yeah,
Uh,
just,
Okay.
mention that, and Paul Edgar, I think, is here for that.
I don't see Paul.
He's not here.
But Paul and Howard Post will provide you with a lot of input from the Neighborhood Association. They will give you some sense of direction as to what the neighborhood association is likely to do. And I would expect that they would call a meeting of the association and give you the opportunity to show this material and anything else you have to them. I would ask them to do that.
Yeah, yeah, we were planning to.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Next on the agenda is a hearing. We're going to move into HR 0907. There seems like there ought to be more number there, but there's not. 0907. Jefferson Street new construction, and because this is a board action, land use action, I have a preamble that I am required to read. We will now commence the public hearing on agenda item 4. Agenda item 5, a request for approval of design for new construction in the McLaughlin Historic District. The criteria for approval of a land use action are contained in Chapter 17 of the Oregon City Municipal Code. The proposed development must comply with applicable provisions contained in the City of Oregon City Comprehensive Plan. Generally, unless otherwise noted, if a request is found to be consistent with the municipal code, it is considered to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. If you wish to participate in this hearing, including challenges for bias or conflict of interest, you must complete and sign the form located on the table at the front of the room and deliver it to staff. Please do so immediately. The chair will recognize only those who have submitted completed forms. When recognized by the chair, please come forward to the podium, give your name, address, and make your statement. All testimony, arguments, and evidence presented regarding this request must be directed toward the applicable criteria or other criteria in the plan or land use regulation which the person believes to apply to the decision. Please address only the applicable criteria for the decision. Please do not repeat testimony. If you wish, you may choose merely to agree with the previous speaker's statements. An issue which may be the basis for appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals shall be raised not later than the close of the record at or following the final evidentiary hearing. Such issues shall be raised and accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the Commission and the parties an adequate opportunity to respond to each issue. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision makers and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes an appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Failure of persons to participate in the public hearing, either orally or in writing, precludes that person's right to appeal to the City Council or to the Land Use Board of Appeals. Written testimony submitted prior to the hearing constitutes participation in the hearing. Failure of the application to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity, to allow the decision maker to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Prior to the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional evidence, arguments, or testimony regarding the application. The Commission shall grant such request by continuing the public hearing pursuant to the standards stated in Oregon Revised Statute 197.763. Do any of the board members have a conflict of interest or ex parte contact regarding this application?
No,
And who has visited the site?
I have not.
I have.
I have not.
Okay. With that little preamble now successfully out of the way, we'll proceed with the public hearing procedure and ask first to hear from the staff regarding the application.
Thank you, Mr. Basinger. This is H.R. 0907 for approval of new construction in the McLaughlin Conservation District, something we have not had for a brand-new single-family building since the design guidelines have been approved. So this is an exciting night to see how our design guidelines work. I provided a PowerPoint presentation. I'm briefly going to go through it, provide some detail, discuss staff's recommendation, and then I know the applicant and his family are here tonight, and I know Ms. McGriff also is here on behalf of the McLaughlin Neighbor Association to make comment. Next slide, please. The Gortons own the bungalow just to the left, and this is their vacant lot, and they are wishing to build a new single-family home in the district. The building site slopes about 10 feet from the front to back, and most of it happens in the first 20 feet. The top elevation is 210, and the bottom elevation is 198. Next slide. The applicant is proposing to build a two-story Queen Anne building with a side entry daylight basement garage, and you can see this is the layout of the house, and it's showing in proportion to the applicant's home they're living in currently to the left, which is the bungalow. The trees that are on site you see from the photograph, the applicant is proposing to retain those. And I believe there's one tree, and I'll let the applicant confirm this, that they have to remove in the middle of the site, but for the most part they're keeping almost all of the existing mature trees on site. Next. This is a side-by-side elevation of the proposed new Queen Anne building next to the applicant's bungalow. According to the design guidelines for the McLaughlin District, Queen Anne is an acceptable design style, and there are multiple Queen Anne buildings in the abutting neighborhood. Queen Anne is the only architectural style that allows a two-story building rather than a 1.5-story, and the applicant has pursued a two-story Queen Anne in the full style, not the vernacular style. Next. This is a close-up of the proposed Queen Anne front elevation with a front tower and front wraparound porch. Next. This is showing the side elevation as you go down to get access to the side entry daylight basement garage. You'll also notice there is a deck coming off the first floor. Next. This is the rear elevation, and you can see once again the deck, and then underneath that would be the daylight basement. Next. This is showing the elevation that is abutting the applicant's house currently. Next. And this is showing the first floor floor plan. And then next is the second floor plan. And in one of the conditions of approval, it speaks of the bathroom. And I just want to show where that is. If you look at the tower area where the bedroom is, it's just to the right is the bathroom area. And we'll speak to the condition of approval on that later, but just want to give you an orientation of what I'm speaking of. And then there's also some discussions in the condition of approval on the right elevation next to bedroom number, oh, I can't read that far. It's basically the front right bedroom. Is that number 3? Okay. Sorry, my vision's not that good all the way over there. Thanks. All right, next. This is a floor plan of the rear basement elevation. You'll see because of the sloping of the lot, you really are only getting the garage aspect of the daylight. Next. So I'll leave those up, those kind of the top 5 recommended revisions for Phase 1. But actually, do you want to go back to the front elevation at the very beginning of the zoomed-in version? Okay, that's perfect. On a staff level, I really had 2 main comments regarding the architecture of the house. A majority of my conditions of approval are a little bit more detail leveled, and or putting a window here, there, or putting a window there, or looking at specs on windows. And I spoke with Mr. Gorton before on this, but traditionally in a Victorian, you had the tower as a kind of a secondary element, and then oftentimes you had the front gable took up the whole front section of the house, rather than here as it's a smaller element, even though it does bump in a little bit. So you do have 2, almost punched out elements, and then it comes in for a couple feet in that center area where the bathroom is. But looking at the existing Victorians and the high-style Victorians in Oregon City, I just couldn't get to the point on a staff where I could recommend approval with this front proportion. So I recommended for condition number 1 of the redesign, and I'll read it for you. Okay. The tower should be a secondary element, but as proposed, it shares prominence with the front gable elevation. The applicant shall either redesign the roof plant to incorporate either a larger front elevation gable or reduce the size of the tower. If the board chooses to not require this redesign, the applicant should at a minimum incorporate an oriel or 1/1 window in the blank area above the front porch on the second floor bathroom elevation. The bathroom may need to be configured to achieve this. That's the big picture comment I have on this application. And so that's the first direction on staff I'm probably going to ask the board is, do you agree with this? Do you see another option? Or do you have other concerns altogether? The secondary aspect of the Phase 1 revisions have to deal with more spec information on the doors. The applicant has indicated they're going to be using Milgard wood windows, and they're going to be using cedar lap siding, which meets our criteria perfectly, but I haven't gotten the specifics on all the windows. So prior to a final approval, staff recommends the applicant bring in all the specs for all the windows, specifically or especially on the rear elevation and some on the side. The applicant has proposed a north elevation that has too large of a blank wall on the bedroom study elevation. If you want to go to the right, should be this next one, yeah. Yeah, and so on a staff level, I see on this, that's quite a long width without any windows for a Queen Anne style. And so on a staff level, depending on how the redesign goes, I recommend an additional window on that elevation in the window, both the upper bedroom and lower study area. And then the applicant has proposed a rockery retaining wall, which is very appropriate to use a rockery. If it's over 4 feet, it will require a building permit. And on a staff level, I kind of see the 4 feet as the level of requiring additional review. So I put a kind of catch-all condition of approval that if it stays below 4 feet, it won't need a building permit, and therefore most likely it's very compatible. And if it's over 4 feet, it'll probably need to have additional review. The second Phase 2 recommendations are some of the just typical detail about the doors and using French doors instead of sliding glass doors and having a two one-car garages if possible. That's about all I have for this application. I'm open for questions the board may have. Oh, I do want to go to the last slide that has the recommended conditions of approval. Sorry, I tried to blow those up as much as possible. They're also on the last page of your staff report.
They're actually not in mine.
They don't look like that. They look like...
Should be on page 7 of 8
They're
of
in
the
front
staff
of the...
report.
They're in front of the pictures.
Oh.
Pretty sure I saw them.
I didn't see them.
There they are.
I think it's here, page 7.
Page
Oh.
7 and 8.
Okay, they're just out of order. Okay.
Does the applicant have comments to make?
I have a couple questions.
First step.
Questions?
The driveway. I didn't see how the driveway could actually meet the slope standards. It's extremely steep.
Well, in Oregon City, we kind of, once you leave the public right-of-way, we kind of leave it up to the applicant for slope. Because of where they're located on the street, the fire engine doesn't have to go down that slope.
Okay.
They can fight the fire from Jefferson Street. It only gets a problem when you're in a more remote area where you actually have to take the trucks up
Right.
the driveway to fight. But because of where they're located, all the hoses can get to all sides of the building from Jefferson Street.
But isn't there a maximum 20% slope with the transitions, top and bottom?
Not that I know for private driveways, but I can look into
okay.
that.
And then I felt the 612 roof was very shallow for a Victorian house. Is there a height limit that they're trying to comply with?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
And I apologize, I missed the 612 roof.
Yeah, front
I
to
thought it
back
was
it's
812.
612.
I thought it was 812.
If you look at the right or left side elevations, it's
Do you know what page that's on?
looking on sheet A2.
Mhm.
And I don't have my glasses, so.
A2 in
Oh,
the
you're right,
upper,
on the roof
in
plan.
the right elevation and the left elevation
I see
shows
it.
a shallower pitch
Yep.
in that direction.
The main front is 6.
Mhm.
For some reason, I read it as 8. I
From
apologize.
From the
Yep.
front, it's steeper.
1212
that-
on the gable, but you're right, it is 612 on the main
I think
one.
if it were steeper, that would bring the scale of that turret more into scale. I think it would help the turret
Even without
proportionally.
revising the front gable aspect of it?
That's something we can discuss, but I think the window and the steeper roof would help. Yes.
Other questions of staff? Does the applicant have comments to make?
Good evening.
Good
My name
evening.
is David Gordon. I reside at 121 Jefferson Street. We're proposing building a new residence on our empty tax lot near our house. We presented some information as far as our design criteria for what we'd like to do as a clean and Victorian style house. We tried to take photographs of the neighboring houses in that general area and also try to find some clean lands in Oregon City Historic District. There's a couple of prominent ones located, and it's inside the report. I shot a couple of pictures of, and one would be located, I'm not sure where this one's actually located, it's on Washington Street. I think it's and that's kind of what we started basing our model on to be building like that style of house. We found a couple other ones, there's another one located just down the street from the Huntley house, which is another two-man Victorian, has a large prominent, I guess you'd call it turret type fixture. During the design process of the house itself, we were trying to, or at least I was trying to emphasize the turret type structure, but not increase the overall height of the roof, and that's why you're seeing that 612 gable or 612 roof pitch. And that's basically going from front to back, and you have roughly 45 to 50 feet that that's spanning. So if I started increasing the distance, if I started putting the overall gable on the house itself, I'm afraid that would start becoming overpowering to the neighborhood, because all of a sudden I'm going to start shooting past everybody else's house. Because primarily around that neighborhood, everybody has a vernacular style house, and it's a story and a half. So if it's only a half a story up on the top, that roof line, even though it's a 12-12, and she was so high. We're trying to go 2 stories pure and then stick a 12-12 or 8-12 on top of that. All of a sudden, we're shooting past all the height limits and everything else. So what I tried to do is break it up and put in the 12-12 cable on the one side, the turret on the other side that's also incorporating 12-12s, given that style of house, and then trying to incorporate that going back and lessening the height of the back of the house itself. So then we also try to tier the house back so it doesn't give that 3-story look in the very back of the house, and we're extending the deck out past and trying to incorporate that in the style of the house. So that's kind of the general idea of what we're shooting for doing with this particular residence. Staff did recommend changing a couple of items, and we're well aware of a lot of those items. As far as the area where the bathroom is located right now, we definitely look at redesigning that particular area. I'm not sure how that would kind of incorporate right now. As far as one of my ideas was maybe dropping the eave line down in that, so that wall isn't so prominent in the front. And that would just kind of get the sloping ceiling height in the bathroom itself, but it would kind of break up the facade and give 3 different heights between the gable end and the turret, and then that hip side. As far as there were some questions regarding the side elevation of the house, and adding some additional windows along there. I'd like to look at that a little further as far as the layouts of the house is concerned, because there's so many windows right now in this house. I would have probably over 20, 25 windows in this house right now. And one of the main concerns I'm going to have is there's no wall space in that one particular bedroom to put in. So I'm going to have windows on the front and the side, and then a closet on the other side, and one blank wall. So it's kind of a concern in that general area. On the downstairs, we could possibly do something because we want to turn that into a study / recreational type room. So I could possibly put a door to incorporate some type of windows. So I'm willing to work in those type of general areas and try to figure something out. Maybe even try to incorporate some type of side facade type picture that comes out from the side of the building, or again, it's kind of up to shoot that thing down. Well, the driveway going down to the garage, I'm not quite sure about the slopes yet on that particular driveway. I know you mentioned something about the 20% slope, and I haven't really measured it out yet. We haven't got the site survey, but we're also, the main design is to have the first floor kind of line up with the rest of our neighboring house, so it doesn't jump out of the sky or doesn't drop down into the ground. So we're going to try to maintain that particular level. And then as we go down from there, we're not going to just shoot for that ground level. So if we have to build up from down there to lift up the site in order to decrease the height of the building, it's probably what we're going to end up doing, because I don't want to end up with a 10 or a 12-foot high garage area. To me, it doesn't make any sense at all. So I'm going to try to stick to a 9-foot height maximum ceiling, maybe 10-foot ceiling to a floor. And that's kind of what I'm going to shoot for, and then after that, it can slope down to the back of the yard and really kind of push that roof down in that direction. So, and we're trying to leave plenty of room right now as far as incorporating the driveway. We're trying to swing around into the driveway or into the garage itself. And right now, I'm showing a single-car garage. I'd really love to go with the double-car garage door, but I'm just kind of concerned about the entry angles of it. If I have 2 small doors that are 8 feet wide, and I think I'm looking at about 22 feet total in width. I'm trying to get that little center pier and reflect something like that. So it might be something where it's a single car door, but we can incorporate something that looks like a double.
Right. Yeah.
More than willing to work with those type of things.
The other issue that staff had regarded the proportion between the tower, the turret, and the front gable on the right-hand side, and the feeling that the turret dominated the front elevation. Do you have a thought on how to deal with that?
Well, I think she kind of saw it, that is what I'm shooting for, is actually have that turret dominate that front elevation, because that's my main design feature on that house, and I'm also trying to incorporate the gable side of it. There is some step back involved with this process. The actual turret itself is not just a straight out turret, it's actually shooting off a 45-degree angle. So it's actually coming out from the side of the house and the front of the house, and it's coming out 6 feet. And then you come into the house about 4 to 5 feet to get to the front door, and then you're coming back out another 3 to 4 feet to get to that other gable end. So there is some variation in the depth of the house as you're looking at it. And the wraparound porch is going to extend 6 feet past that. So there's a lot of variation as far as that front facade, as far as the elevation just doesn't give it justice. If I had some type of 3D imagery, I'd love to be able to do that and show the shadow lines or something like that. But I don't really think it's a flat facade.
Okay.
I think it looks large. I mean, it's a little out of scale for a traditional Victorian house, but I mean, I can see where you're coming up with your spatial needs inside too. 'Cause,
Mhm.
you know, with the octagon shape, that bed barely fits in there. So.
Well, it's kind of misleading to that. It looks large on the actual piece of paper, but when you actually start measuring the thing out, we're only looking at about 32 to 35 feet width. And so it's a very narrow house as far as the structure is concerned. I mean, you're looking at basically one room on one side, one room on the other side, and a narrow hallway going down the center. So as far as the width of the house, it's almost as skinny as you can get a house to work. And the only reason it kind of looks a little wider is because I did project that turret, the octagon dining room type area, out at a 45-degree angle and pushed it out as far as the walls are concerned. I tried to give it a little bit of space inside of there. But it does come back in on each side. So even on the side elevation, it starts shooting back in a good 6, 7 feet to go back into the kitchen, and it kind of bumps back out again to give some more variation in shadow lines and things. And as far as our house at the 121 Jefferson, I believe that house is a good 45, 50 feet in width. And our neighboring house, right next to this proposed structure, is about 35 feet in width. So we're kind of right in that ballpark as far as what the houses all look like. Even the houses across the street, I believe they're all about 30 to 35 feet in width. So we're not shooting for anything that's grand overall in width. So that's why I'm thinking that the front elevation is misleading, because the main structure is 35, and that porch does extend about 6 feet past that, so it kind of gives it some mass at the base.
What is the width of the property?
It is another area we're actually looking at.
We don't have a site plan on here, so.
You should have a sheet A1.
Oh, maybe we do. My pages are stuck together. Okay. Now I see the driveway.
What we did, we just went through a vacated lot process, and it's basically on the right-hand side of the proposed property. And we just vacated Second Street and shared that with the neighbor. So what we're proposing to do is actually do a lot line adjustment with our current property and increase that by 14 feet, try to balance out both properties, so it kind of balances out that whole end of the block. And then our neighboring property will be a standard size lot plus 30 feet, so it'll actually have a entire lot in that spot.
Okay.
There is some leeway with the driveway going down the property line, but I also want to create a buffer between the two properties. As the drawing currently shows, there's a pretty large willow tree that's located right on the property line. We'd like to maintain that willow tree, but get far enough away with it so we can have driveway shoot down underneath the willow tree and be able to move it into the house. We try to push the house over the other side of the property as much as possible without impacting the house.
Okay.
And as far as, there might have been some misunderstanding regarding the trees on the actual property. There's 3 large fir trees. And staff was indicating that we were trying to maintain those trees. I'm not sure if we need to maintain those trees because currently they're located on the slope itself. And so in order to build the house at the level that we want to, we're going to have to take those trees out because they are about 2 to 3 feet down. And we could probably look at trying to save them, but as far as my understanding is concerned, if you start burying existing tree roots 2 to 3 feet, they're goners anyway. So there might be 1 tree we could save. The other 2 are actually physically on the slope itself, so they have to be removed.
Any more questions? Okay, thank you. I will now ask for comments from Denise McGriff, Chairman of the Neighborhood Association. You're not the chairman, and you're the person, land use chair. Okay, I knew that.
Denise McGriff, representing the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association. Our address is P.O. Box 1027, Oregon City, 97045. And I'm going to attempt to address the criteria as you have requested in your statement, because that's what we're supposed to do. I had an opportunity to meet with Michelle and David prior to their submittal, and I would say that I want to concur primarily with what the staff has recommended. In looking at the plan, and he was kind enough to send it to me, I sat there with the plan and I sit there with the criteria, and that's kind of how I try to look at it. So, barring the fact that he made the comment about the front elevation doesn't really do it justice, I looked at the other item which was pointed out, which is looking at the site plan. And I think that Christina is still correct in the sense that that's probably the thing that I noticed the most, and I stated in my comments that the volumes and the massing of the proposed building in that particular configuration do exceed the historic volumes in the immediate district. And I want to clarify that. During the reviews, I take a look at the particular sub-districts of the neighborhood, because each of the districts, Ladderette, Arclight, and Dutch Camp, which this is in Dutch Camp, were developed at different times. There's different styles of building within them, and it's rather difficult to take a property that's on one end of the district and say, oh, it's just like this one way over here, when the development in McLaughlin occurred over a specific time period. What I can use as an example is my own home, that while the Huntley house was there prior to my house being built, my house was one of 2 houses built in the neighborhood prior to 1925. There were lots and lots of vacant lots. And so the primary characteristic of the area that I live in, although the Huntley house and the Badcock house are both there, are primarily the styles of houses that are outlined in the conservation district. This particular portion of the McLaughlin neighborhood is the Dutch Camp area, and it was the earliest settled area of our neighborhood. And the styles in that particular neighborhood range from 1878 and 1912. And then you also have to consider the fact that people picked up houses like they were Lego blocks and moved them all over the place. So some of the houses are in different places when they were built than they are now. As an example is the house next to mine, which was in Dutch Camp and was moved from there to our particular sub-neighborhood district, and they changed the configuration, so it's no longer pure Italianate. It's now an Italianate with a bungalow porch, so there you go. People just did a lot of different things. So the interesting thing about this particular section of the neighborhood is that people who lived in that particular area were of rather modest means. The Bush family was probably an exception to the rule, is that they had a little bit more money than other people, and they chose to show it off in their house. So to me, that particular house is really the dominant sort of benchmark, as you would, of kind of style in that particular neighborhood. And it does have a particular setting, because it sits way up. It's not as massive. So I'm concurring with Christina in the sense that either one of those sides needs to have something else into it, either scale down the turret or maybe enlarge the other proportion, because even with that drawing, which is very two-dimensional, you can still see the two differences of the style. So, and Christina was also evaluating the house based on the height of the Huntley house, and again, I go back to the sub-district. I think that the thing that they have done very well is that David was very concerned about the front elevation of the house and it being in line with the other houses on the street. And you go anywhere in any historic neighborhood, and that's one of the characteristics of those historic neighborhoods. You have front elevations pretty much lining up along the street edge, and that's really good, so you don't have this sort of thing happen. And I think that's really good. I think that Christina is correct in her looking at this in a two-stage process, and I think that the applicant has indicated his willingness to work with her, and I think there will be a better plan in the end by allowing that. And I think, again, when we developed those design guidelines, we felt that people ought to have that opportunity to do that, because there's always little tweaks, and you never know exactly what they are. So I think that's great. I think that the siding and the fact that they're continuing to keep as many trees as possible will mitigate that side elevation. There is another house that's over on John Adams that the HRB reviewed, and it doesn't have as many trees, but since you have to be in a particular situation to see that rear elevation, and because it also is built on a slope, it sort of steps down. But on the front, you would never know the difference in that. So I think that's a good design feature. I also concur with the staff's finding of about the windows and some of the other elements that need to be further delineated. And again, that's just in the process of having to pick that out. I talked to David a little bit about the window should be in a more simple style. And again, he's drawing it on the computer, so it does show the zillion billion grids, but I think it would be probably cheaper if they have a simple configuration, a 1/1 configuration. I think that's about all I'm going to say about that, and I appreciate the fact that they were willing to sit down and chat. I think the staff has done an excellent job of trying to sort things out. I believe that I would want to again recommend staff recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments? In that case, we will close the public testimony at this point and open discussion.
Now, this is a two-step process, so we don't need to make a formal recommendation at this point. Is that correct?
No, I think the key, for the applicant tonight, I think, based on my recommended 1 to 5 phase 1 approvals, are there any that you want to revise or amend? Specifically, number 1 is the big question, and any further direction you may want to give to the applicant regarding recommendation number 1, which is the whole proportion of the tower versus front gable. On this level, my recommendation is for them to kind of go forth and provide the additional information through 1 through 5, come back in the September meeting, and the conditions for phase 2 are just general conditions of approval. So if they can come back and meet the first 5 at the September meeting, the board should be able to approve it that evening. And so at this point tonight, I think whatever direction and specifics you can give the applicant specifically for number 1, and also regarding the side elevation study window, and I can move the PowerPoint to that elevation if you want to, I think would be really helpful for the applicant. And especially regarding number 1, regarding the 6/12 pitch versus 8/12, 10/12. I know the applicant was discussing his reasoning behind that, and that makes a lot of sense regarding this design,
The
and
front
based
elevations.
on if there a redesign is required, that pitch may be different. So because at this point it's to the board to deliberate and give direction. If they want to.
do think this pitch makes it to be more of a Victorian appearance, even if it were an 812 rather than a 1012. And it helps to get the scale of this turret down a little bit too.
But then
That
in
window
relation-
here would help too.
We've already, in the recommendations, discussed the side lights on the front door. If you were to take this
Widen that.
2 feet, that would take that feature up at least equal to the top of the turret. Give you a lot more mass.
This is almost an
front,
Italian
and it might
proportion.
not even change the interior floor plan much to do that. It would make this feature a lot more emphatic than it is, if not actually dominant. You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah. Well, and this could be just a small decorative window up here or something to go. Not necessarily a one-over-one. So there's
And,
that.
The problem with that is that the shower and tub enclosure is right
Mhm.
abutting that, and
Right.
the bathroom would have to be reconfigured.
Over in West Lynn, they put picture windows in their showers.
Right.
so-
And you could put it up high, too. so-
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I think it would,
This is,
visually, it would
um,
work better if there was a window there.
And then definitely something here. And again, I understand that concern about placement of furniture, but we did two
Or, I can see, oh, yeah,
tall windows here and 2 or 3 down here. That would break it up.
And again, have high windows, so.
Well, those are all included in the staff recommendation. This isn't.
I'm concerned, though, if you, even though I like the proportion when you make the roof steeper like that, it, as the applicant said, it makes it taller and more out of proportion to the homes around.
Yeah, but the Victorian homes were always much taller than the bungalows, and I mean, that's just part of the nature of that style of architecture, which is very stylized. You didn't often see them this tall from the backside, though. But if this were raised up just a little bit, I mean, if it were an 812 or they want a 612, it would come up to right about here. Which, I mean, I just think that looks a lot better.
Okay.
But I
We
don't know if
have-
there's an issue with height limits, too.
That's
I
a
can't-
question for staff.
Yeah.
The issue with height limit, is there a height limit?
It's 35 feet, and that's measured from the midpoint, from the top of the peak to the bottom of the eaves. So in this situation, he's well under his 35 feet.
Okay, and it's average on all
Yeah,
four
so
sides?
the midpoint, top of the peak, the top at the top is peak,
Right.
to the bottom of that eave, and you find the midpoint. So if
But
you look,
we take all four corners of the house and average them? Or- 'cause
That's
we'd
to
have
the
pretty
eave.
no,
steep
because
slopes.
I'd
To the
find that
eave.
the top, we would take the toppest, whatever eave has the toppest peak, and we would take that.
Okay, but on the backside, we're 28 feet to the eve.
No, it puts from the front elevation,
It's
sorry.
only from the
Yeah.
front, okay, that was my concern.
Sorry. I was speaking the gable versus the tower.
Right, okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's from the front elevation, so a daylight, sorry, the height is measured from the front elevation, yeah. And between the tower and the main gable, we would take the whatever peak, I mean, whatever of the roof
It's not an
peaks
issue.
is the
Right.
highest one. It's not an issue, I guess. He's going to be well under his 35 feet.
dealing with the 5 recommendations, how do we feel about each of them? And then if we want to add a 6th regarding the roof pitch, we can vote on that as well.
I think that would be my preference.
To adopt the 5 and then add the 6th. Mm-hmm. Do you think you can do that in one motion?
And then I wrote condition number 1, not knowing if the board was going to require a redesign, so there may need to be a revision to number 1.
Well, what we were kind of whispering about up here was widening the element on the right 2 feet. It looks like that would have minimal impact on the floor plan.
And still get access to the front door?
Right, and if we got rid of one of the side lights. then-
Or not have side lights,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, the floor plan.
And then I think the recommendations about windows we all agreed with. But I don't know that they necessarily need to be 1/1 windows. They could be tall windows on the walls to allow for placement of furniture. And I think
I'm
there's-
sorry, can you say that again? I didn't get you.
They don't necessarily need to be 1/1 windows. They could be taller windows to allow for placement of furniture.
Hi.
Right. And then, I mean, Queen Anne, you can definitely put an oriel window in, you know, on a side or
Or a
front.
lot of times you saw decorative windows
Yeah.
with leaded glass,
Mhm.
you know, small panes, which I think would be very appropriate. So I guess we do need to make a motion then?
Yep, so most likely a motion if
Okay.
you need to revise the wording of number 1, and then if you want to add a number 6.
Okay, that's my motion. And revise number 6 to have a minimum pitch of 8 to 12.
On the main gable.
On the main,
Add a number 6.
that is the number 6 condition.
Yeah, add a 6.
Okay, so let me thank you, restate
Take
this.
this either here.
That the applicant, so I'm going to reread number 1, that the proportions of the front tower, the main tower shall be a secondary element, blah, 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 blah. The applicant shall redesign the roof plane to incorporate a larger front elevation gable of 2 feet. Is that what the
2
recommendation?
feet in
Well,
width, I think.
Yeah, that was just a kind of a arbitrary number that seemed kind of right by widening the
So you're,
square feature
Yeah.
there. You increase the height and mass of the gable.
okay, I might do it if possible, kind of like it's a direction, but if they come back with a
Yeah.
different or a new design, it's not, okay.
Yeah, I'm not an architect,
Right.
and I don't play one on TV
Right.
either.
Any comment regarding the window in the bathroom? You're thinking that won't be needed if with the larger gable?
I think that's probably true.
I think you'd really have to look at it
Okay.
and see, and it needs to be symmetrical with the door
Okay.
too, so.
So the applicant may need to incorporate. Okay.
And we'll leave that up to your discretion.
Okay. And then revise, I mean, this isn't the final land use decision, these are more recommendations, so I'm not too worried since we're not making a final land use decision on this one. And then number 6, revise to have the main gable be a minimum of 812. Okay. And I know the applicant wants to speak too. And since this is you can open the,
Yes.
I don't think you closed the
If,
hearing anyway, so.
We would very much like to hear your comments on the things we've been talking about.
Certainly, loved it. Kind of lost me on that front gable area. I wasn't quite sure what direction we're going with that.
Well, if you were looking at our red pen
Oh.
scribblings,
Do you want me to do the,
you see this moved over a little bit to make this just a little bit wider to change its proportion relative to that, to make this
emphasis, or actually, in effect, de-emphasize the tower and make
There's
it
another option.
more of the secondary feature that the Queen Anne architecture would have reflected.
All right.
Yeah, because the turret element would have been narrower traditionally, and understand the need for reasonable living spaces.
I think there's some areas where we can actually modify some of it. And the side lights on the front door are probably gone.
Yeah, I think that's part of the detail
It was one of the recommendations.
for phase 2 somewhere in here.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff is still up for, it's still in very early design procedure. I haven't even got a window like pattern yet or whatever to shoot for. Probably am just gonna go with simple windows.
I think that's
Well,
most appropriate.
I think that
Probably won't be any volumes, I mean,
you're
there was I am gonna actually look into a product, it's from Milgard. It's a wood clad series. What it is, it's actually a fiberglass window. It has a pattern on it, and you can actually paint it, so it looks like wood. And I'm gonna try to get some samples, maybe bring that in. just have
Yeah, you're gonna wanna-
do that and see if we can get that approved instead of actually going with actual wood save substantial. Also had a question regarding the roof pitches. You said item number 6, or item number 6, minimum 8 and 12. Are you saying that for the gable end, or is that the hip end in the front?
It's the front and back pitches of the roof
Right.
to get it up a little more in the Victorian appearance from the front side.
That will add substantial height to that overall structure.
I think it'll look better. See what you think about it.
Yeah, I have no problem adding the height to the structure. I was trying to minimize the height and actually line it up with the other houses. So.
But I think it is a Victorian style. It's not a bungalow style. And I think that's kind of what Denise was alluding to. I mean, houses were moved all over, and there aren't very many Victorians in this part of the neighborhood.
I wouldn't mind looking at doing something over the, basically there's a bathroom in the upstairs. So, I heard something, someone mentioned something about a window in that particular area. It's not a direction I'd really like to go in at this point. I much rather decrease the height at that point, actually slope the bathroom ceiling height and bring down that E line that might break up the two different elements.
That would be great.
And then there's also recommendations for windows on the side of the structure, 13-foot and wall. At this time, I'd recommend actually placing the height of trees or something on there instead of windows. The current floor plan doesn't really allow me to really have windows in that particular area.
What if you had high windows so you could still have furniture placement, just have a decorative window above it?
Yeah, I can look at my wife chatting my ear. She wants a really bad. It's only money.
That's important.
It's only money.
It is Oregon. You can use more windows.
Yeah, I'll buy a nice.
Big trees of Oregon,
Yeah.
they're really big.
That's right.
They're pretty expensive too.
Mhm.
know.
That's
Really expensive trees, and no
Yeah.
less big trees. I guess I'll look
Well, we appreciate all the hard work you've gone to. It looks good. I mean, this is a great start.
Yeah, you've obviously put a lot of thought into it.
This is definitely the fourth, fifth iteration already.
Well, I think you're real close.
I think that was about it.
okay.
The rest were basically doing the
Yeah. Just to give some dates out, the September Historic Review Board meeting is the 4th, so there's 5 Tuesdays in September, but it's the 4th one, that's September 22nd. And to get any staff recommendation for this, you'd need to turn anything in by September 13th. to me, if you want to have any recommendation. If not, then...
As far as redesigns are
Right, as far as redesigns. And that means that the Historic Review Board can get it in their packet and be able to look at it. And they're more likely to be able to come to the meeting with kind of prepared for approval, I guess.
concerned, that was September
13th. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, the calendar I'm
meeting-
looking at, it starts on Sundays, and I always, sorry, it's September 14th. I apologize.
At that time, do I need to provide anything regarding the windows, or can we do that as it relates to the...
Well, I think not having any. One thing that I would suggest trying to get, if you want to pursue that alternate material, is to see if you can actually bring a physical window. Usually you can check them out from Marvin. The board, when they went through the design guidelines, they talked a lot about new materials and knowing that they'll never be able to keep up with whatever new material is up there for windows. They kind of basically said, you're good to go with wood, and then anything new that comes in, you need to kind of make your case why it meets the same dimensions and aspect of a wood window.
Do I
So.
need to provide that on the 14th, or bring it for that next meeting?
We don't need the window specifications to approve the general design.
No.
That we could follow up on
At the
later.
actual hearing would be
Yeah.
appropriate, I think.
Do you? Well,
I guess the question, if you want the final decision on the September 22nd,
Yes.
then yes, you'll want to bring it in. If you want,
I need a final decision as soon as possible.
Okay.
I really want to break ground this year.
so that yeah,
Okay. Okay.
Right.
Yep.
The worst puts me into a situation where prices
Right.
are going up.
right.
So yeah, okay, I'll bring window samples.
Okay.
Floor samples are just wood, so we don't really need samples of wood.
I think just the spec sheet of what you're going to get, and the door actually was a staff approval afterwards. Kind of think of the phase 1 as things you need to provide information for by the next meeting, and phase 2 is just a staff approval as we move through the process. And because I didn't have any information on the spec, I wanted more. So even if it's just that one thing, and not letting the board know if you want to do divided light or not divided light, or those kind of issues. And if it comes down to one little detail, the board can write a condition of approval for staff, but not having any details on the windows. I wanted to do that in a phase 1.
Okay. I don't think we ever completely finished the motion. You're nodding. Did we completely finish the motion?
No.
No, we did not. Before we do that, then, can we take a look at item number 3 and address the applicant's suggestion that that be mitigated with landscaping? The-
This is elevation.
Yeah, that's the one.
It's one of the first things
I'm-
you're going to see when you come up that street.
Is it?
It's
Okay.
that elevation.
If you look at the plan itself, there's a large willow tree that's off to the back.
There is.
So it might be one of the first things you see, but I think one of the first things you're going to see is that willow tree. And there is room on the site plan to actually have some landscaping in that general area.
I'm thinking the upper level, it's more important to have some kind of window up there than the main level. And they don't need to be full height windows. They, so I don't think he's gonna drop that. So,
Only if you were trying to have a view. Oh, okay. I wanted to raise the question because
About how the upstairs is more important than, I agree.
I think that's very appropriate.
Yeah. Doesn't have to be a window that opens, just a horizontal.
Okay. So do you want to read back our motion?
Can you read, can someone was there actually a formal motion? I'm sorry.
I did make a formal motion.
Okay.
And you were helping
So,
me with
going
okay,
to
the
have to
formal
make it
motion, as restated by Mr. Island, that recommended revision number 1 to be changed to emphasize the widening the front gable elevation 2 feet in width if possible. And I can't remember, was the window in the bathroom recommended also or not?
It's recommended that it be
They
explored,
they recommended that the window be explored as an option.
but not necessary.
Number
possible.
3, that the north elevation's blank walls, that the second story section of that be pursued for a smaller window. And number 6, that the applicant look at an 812 main roof pitch. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All right. Mr. Basinger?
I.
Ms. Yates?
Aye.
Mr. Island? Mr.
Aye.
Island? Motion carries, and this, also we need to recommend that this be continued to the September 22nd HRB meeting. So we have to do one more, sorry.
Is that a separate motion?
Separate motion.
Go for it.
I move that we continue it till the September 22nd hearing of the HRB.
I can second that.
Mr. Basinger?
Aye.
Ms. Yates?
Well, just discussion, I won't be here that night, probably. So hopefully others will, and you'll have quorum. Aye.
We will.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much. We now close the land use hearing. And item number 6 is the discussion of demolition by neglect as relates to the 2 letters that were sent out. Staff, what
Yes.
can you report?
Yes. Well, we sent out both of the letters via certified mail, and I haven't received any information back. Per 1524, our new demolition by neglect design standards, we have to give notice to the owners, and we encourage them to come to the meeting, but they're not required to be here tonight. What your task is tonight is to review the information provided in both of the letters and make a finding if you believe that either of the homes meet the definition of demolition by neglect. And that kind of starts the process for Mr. Spurb and I to contact the property owners and look at stabilization measures. And then if there are any stabilization measures that may require some historic review board review because they're exterior alterations or there's something, you'll be brought back in. But at this point, kind of gets brought back to staff to work with the property owners to find stabilization measures.
Now, am I right that the owners of the Beamer Way house agreed to restore that house as a condition of the partitioning?
They agreed that they couldn't demolish it within 5 years of the platting.
Okay. It's on the market.
Yes, and actually, I don't want to give a premature hooray, but I have talked to a person who really wants to buy it.
So have I.
And really wants to
I've
rehab
talked
it.
to a person who wrote an offer on it.
Yeah, so hopefully the
We
Beamer
wrote the
Way,
offer. They
the
wanted
Beamer
to-
Way very well may be a success story. Yeah, that's fine. The Beamer Way very well may be a success story, but we're kind of having this continue down the process.
Yes.
Question, when you said you haven't received any information
information back from owners? You didn't get the green card?
I haven't
back?
gotten the green card back. I've sent out the green card. It has not come back to us.
It went out with our packets, probably.
No, this got sent out before that.
Yes. Could be true.
Well, if the Beamer Way house is, not an issue, if you think it's,
Well, it's on the market and it's getting action. My understanding is that they have accepted an offer and not the one that I was involved in.
On staff's recommendation, I recommend if either of these meet your definition to move forward irrespective of any potential
Okay.
purchase. And then if for some
because
reason.
the conditions
Right.
that apply to the current owner will transfer
Correct.
as part of the
Yes.
sales. So
Correct.
well, my opinion, they are both.
they are. I don't think there's any question about it.
And that's why we asked last time that they be pursued.
Mhm.
So, I guess we adopt the finding of fact.
In both cases, there's substantial water intrusion that is jeopardizing
Mhm.
the structures, and I don't think there's any question that meets the definition of demolition by
Mhm.
neglect.
Now, the Beamer Way, just to let you know, though Mr. Spurb couldn't go inside, he felt that, both of them, he felt were still structurally, and I don't use the sound because I'm not a building official, where he was
Viable.
viable. There we go. That's a good word. Structurally viable.
And we want to keep it that way.
Yeah. But he definitely wanted to say that both were very still structurally viable, and the Beamer Way, obviously more of the two. And he felt a lot of the issues with the Beamer Way property, a big issue was just the vegetation abatement. And, the front porch was sinking, but that very well may be a long-standing issue because the front porch may never have had a foundation on it, because that area looks most likely that it was enclosed over time, and it was a front porch that probably was not on a foundation, was enclosed over time. So that could have been a long-standing issue, whereas, it looked very structurally viable. So the Captain Cochran house was the same way. A majority of its issues were relating to the roof, which one of the first mitigation measures will be tarping for the winter by the property owner.
No.
He
He is.
we're working with the daughter who inherited the property. Yeah.
Well,
That's
they're-
not all he had in common with
Yeah.
dirt.
Yeah. Well, so we're working with the daughter who's trying to manage the estate.
Yep.
It also has water problems.
He has passed away. Yeah.
Serious basement issues.
And that's going to be obviously the harder property to market and such and
Yeah.
such. But
Yeah.
we very well may bring. Once we send this out and I'll be doing the formal notice once you make your decision tonight, and then basically try to set up a meeting with the property owner and the of both of them to come up with your mitigation stabilization measures. And I don't know if Beamer Way necessarily has any quick ones that have to be that has to happen in the next month or two, but the Cochran House big one will be formal winter tarping.
Yeah. I look forward to that.
Yes.
Howard Clemson's, yes.
Yeah. It is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the finding of fact for both of these properties and direct staff to the next
Move
step.
forward.
I'll second that.
Okay.
20 years.
As long as I've lived here and before that, Howard
Yes.
told me that it's always looked like that.
Yeah.
It's pretty moldy and nasty inside right
Yeah, I
now.
went in it once, I had to wear a mask.
So, Mr. Basinger,
Aye.
Ms. Yates,
Aye.
Mr. Eisland.
Aye.
Motion carries. So I will take this and move forward with Mr. Spurb, and you very well may not get involved again, or you may. We'll bring you back into the process. The applicant, both applicants, Beamer Way, but Cochran very well may come in for a demolition request, and they will be reviewed based on the merits of their application regarding the criteria. So you may see it through that end too. So there may be a kind of a two-path of the demolition by neglect, but also pursuing a demolition request to show that they can make an economic viability argument on it.
Well, it's an eyesore and it's an attractive nuisance at this
They
point.
tried to buy it in 1998, but the owner, by then, I think, was kind of losing it. And he was asking some ridiculous price. They had an agreement, and the guy came to get the closing papers, and he changed his mind. So it almost happened.
It would make a great new home for Iceland architects.
We looked at it a few years ago. It was pretty nasty.
Well, that's why you're
Zone commercial.
do things
It
like
was
that.
too costly to make those improvements.
Okay.
All right, well, we have one last.
We have item number 7 on the agenda is the Historic Preservation Grant Program application revisions, which I have had ample opportunity to review on my computer screen, which is to say I haven't been able to look at them in focus.
And for that reason, I was
Yeah,
going to suggest that
that's
we
fine.
hold this over
Yeah.
if we can. So-
I haven't heard anybody has wanted to apply yet, so we can hold this over the work session.
Great.
Okay.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, I'd like to go home and eat dinner.
Policies about applying.
Is that a motion to?
I move that we continue this till the work session, since we got our packets today and
And-
haven't had a chance to review it closely.
If I do get someone who wants to apply in September, what should I recommend? They apply in October or
Or use the
continue?
old application.
Use the old. I mean, I
Or
guess what
the
direction?
alternative would be to use the old form.
Okay.
Mhm.
I mean, really, the only thing that's changed is the big thing that's changed is the $3,000, and I can just let them know about that for any, every 2 years. So.
Okay.
And comments on the new
we-
layout, I mean, now we've all gone electric to go with everybody else, so this is what you're going to be seeing from now on. I know it's not very beautiful, but we're trying to get a little bit more, but this is
Saw
kind of
that.
what Planning Commission, City Commission, Historic Review Board will all be this version now, because we're all sharing the same document system. And I will make sure that next time you get an agenda, it'll get mailed appropriately rather than yesterday.
I think Vicki made the motion that we continue this to the work
Yeah.
session.
I second it.
This is all in
It's
favor.
done.
Yeah.
We didn't need to
Yeah.
vote. Aye. Okay.
You
It's
need to
done.
adjourn the meeting.
This
Thank
meeting
you for
is
a long
adjourned.
evening.